watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country. Now, here's your host, former Alabama All-American, Mike Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in. Roll Tide Daily. God, I love that music. Signals the best 30 minutes of my day, and like I've been telling you guys since we started the show last week, that I'm going to try to do everything in my power to make this the best 30 minutes of you guys' day as well. Got a ton of Roll Tides coming in the comment section. There are no guests today, so we're going to welcome in a ton of comments, have a ton of conversations about all the goings-on within the SEC. We're going to talk about Jeremy Pruitt. We're going to talk about Kirby Smart. We're going to talk about, obviously, Nick Saban. I got some Greg Byrne and some Bryant-Denny Stadium beer stuff thrown in there, and then a good video at the end of the day to make sure you guys are locked in. So appreciate you joining us. Randy Ashley's joining, Justin DelMarco, Doug Cooper, Jane McCorkle-Nelson, Joan Miles Arender. Hope I'm saying all these names right. Thank you guys for hanging out with us today. Just a quick update as far as the men's golf team goes. We've been talking about it all week. They lose yesterday in the national championship match against Oklahoma State in Stillwater on Oklahoma State's home course. So had a heck of a year, made a heck of a run. Hate to see those guys go down, but Oklahoma State was just better. And so Bama's not going to win the national title in golf, but they will be back. They have a great team and a lot of talent wrapped around them. So without further ado, I want to get into topic number one today because we covered this a little bit yesterday. If you guys remember, the highlight of the day was Nick Saban kind of tired of being the SEC scapegoat, right? He's tired of being the face of this conversation when it comes to transfers within the SEC, be it undergrad transfers, be it graduate transfers. Nick Saban just wants the rule to stay the rule, right? If we have a rule, let's abide by it. Let's make sure all the coaches within the SEC are abiding by the same rules. In case you missed it, and I don't know if you've been living under a rock, but this is what Nick Saban had to say yesterday down at the SEC spring meetings in Destin.
Why could put up the same fight with Brandon Kennedy, especially when there seems to be the push for more freedom, particularly with graduate transfers and proposals?
Well, then we should change the rule. I don't think it should be on me. I think we should change the rule. All right, if we agree in the SEC at these meetings that we're going to have free agency in our league and everybody can go wherever they want to go when they graduate, and that's what's best for the game, then I think that's what we should do. Then Brandon Kennedy can go wherever he wants to go. But if we don't do that, why is it on me? Because we have a conference rule that says he can't do it. And he can do it, but he's supposed to sit out for a year. So why is it on me? It's not even my decision. It's a conference rule. I always give people releases. And he has a release to go wherever he wants to go, but the conference rule says he can't go to the conference. So, why is that on me? The Maurice Smith thing wasn't on me either.
Now, I think it's interesting that he kind of points to Maurice Smith as well as Brandon Kennedy in that clip. He also talks a little bit about, later in this interview, talks about, what's good for the game. How can we as coaches kind of make sure these players are being held accountable on a daily basis for everything that's going inside the program. Here's Nick Saban talking about some of the problems that it has if you can just transfer without consequences.
If we make a rule that guys can transfer whenever they want to transfer, how are we supposed to get people to do what they should do? I'm not talking about as football players. I'm talking about as people. I'm talking about making good choices and decisions off the field. I'm talking about doing the right things academically. So if a guy's missing class and I say, you're not going to play in this game because you're missing class, which I've done on occasion, and then he just says, well, I'm transferring. Is that good?
Now, obviously, we touched on both of those video clips yesterday, talking a little bit about why is it Nick Saban? Why does it fall on his shoulders? Why is he the one that has to be the face of SEC coaches? Why does he have to be the voice of reason? There's a rule in place. Nick Saban just wants everybody to kind of abide by the same rules. Now, I thought what was interesting later on as the day goes, though, you get to hear from a couple of different Saban assistants, a couple of guys that I know and love, Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt. And you would think that in a couple of different ways, right, that maybe Kirby Smart jumps in there and kind of has his back a little bit. Hey, you know what? We don't know what's good for the game. Let's make sure we're talking to everybody and being smart about this. Same goes for Jeremy Pruitt, right? They've been in those shoes. They've been doing a couple of different things. Here's Jeremy Pruitt's quote right here from yesterday. I thought this was really interesting, kind of a quick quote. I think that if somebody graduates, to me, they've kind of fulfilled their obligation. Now, that's my view. Who am I to stand in the way of somebody transferring? Now, in full disclosure, Jeremy Pruitt did head down to Alabama. Everybody knows Jeremy Pruitt is a former Alabama player. He headed down from Middle Tennessee State during his tenure. He got a full release. I think it's kind of interesting. Jeremy Pruitt not backing up Nick Saban here, kind of going against the grain in terms of how Nick Saban feels. He doesn't say, hey, listen, these are the rules. Let's make sure we abide by them. He just says, listen, this is how I feel, and these are how things are going to go. Now, let me kick it over to another little piece of Kirby Smart sound from yesterday. Also, given the opportunity, I think the media wanted, listen, let's see how he thinks about this. He used to be under Nick Saban. He's got a great program right now. Maybe Kirby Smart will back up Nick Saban a little bit and kind of echo what he's saying. Kirby Smart kind of choosing a little bit of a different route here, though, and you wonder how Nick Saban feels about this. Here's Kirby Smart yesterday.
Yeah, I think everybody has their preferences. I think that when you poll the SEC, who knows where to fall. We'll certainly find out here shortly. I think it's a lot of silence in the room last year when it's proposed, and now all of a sudden it's got maybe a little more steam. I certainly philosophically feel like if a person graduates from undergrad and they've done their graduation work and they choose to go somewhere else. Now, the football activists could say they're only doing that for football, but there's 560 student athletes at the University of Georgia, and there's tons of those same student athletes in other sports that they may actively be going to pursue a graduate degree. Most people get a graduate degree where they got undergrad or somewhere else, usually somewhere else. So if they're going to graduate school for that purpose somewhere else, then I don't see the issue with them once they graduate and they've done that and they have a year of eligibility remaining. If they want to do that, I think they should be able to do that.
Now, in full disclosure, I as a former player, I tend to agree a little bit with what Kirby Smart's trying to say. If you're a graduate transfer and you've graduated, you've fulfilled your obligation, you ought to have a little bit more liberal transfer rules. I think when it comes to Auburn and Tennessee, though, that's where you kind of get some things that are at odds. And it was kind of interesting to me that we don't hear Kirby really backing up what Nick Saban's saying at all. Even though he's seen a lot of the same things that Nick Saban's saying and is in a lot of the same positions, Kirby Smart just kind of goes at odds with Nick Saban, kind of throws him out there. I said yesterday, Nick Saban's tired of being the scapegoat for the SEC. Jeremy Pruitt and Kirby Smart, neither one of them did anything to kind of back him up. They just kind of threw him back to the Wolves and let him kind of uphold this entire kind of rule decision and act like it's on Nick Saban. I also think what's interesting about it, too, is Kirby Smart, this kind of holier-than-thou attitude. I love Kirby Smart to death, but here's a guy 2 years ago who didn't want anybody to transfer to Miami when Mark Richt left. It was all about, hey, we're not going to open up this can of worms. I'm not going to let anybody follow Mark Richt down to Miami, and Miami wasn't even on Georgia's schedule. So I think it's kind of interesting to hear Kirby Smart kind of backtrack on those words a little bit. I think the word revisionist history kind of comes to mind there, but to each their own in terms of those rules. We got a ton of comments kind of coming in. Wait till it happens to Tennessee or Georgia, says James Perkins. Then we'll see what they really think. I agree with that. I think this is a double-edged sword. I think that Nick Saban just saying, hey, listen, if we're going to do this, then let's do it. And I think that we've seen in the history of the SEC over the last 10 years, Nick Saban usually adapts to a lot of these rule changes faster than a lot of the other coaches do. So I think it's kind of interesting to look at it from that perspective. Can Nick Saban go down to an LSU and get a corner? Can Florida hold on to their corners during a coaching change? Can some of these guys, wide receivers from Ole Miss, do they want to go play for a guy like Nick Saban? I think that's what's interesting about this topic. Now, we got a ton of comments coming in. Like I said, we're going to welcome you guys' comments all day. I love to hear how you guys kind of feel about Jeremy Pruitt and Kirby Smart. Is it a take it or leave it attitude? Do you not care really what's going on with them? Do you wish them the best? Are you kind of like me to where you look at Jeremy Pruitt and say, well, you know what? It wouldn't be bad if he had a ton of success, because maybe one day Mama will call and I'll be headed back to Tuscaloosa. I think those are great comments to be put in the comment section. Thank you guys for joining us as always. Kicking back right in here in the comment section. You guys are cracking me up. Bo Strahan got a comment. He's weighing all of this so they can have Bama's rejects and so they can have Bama's rejects knowledge of the system. Now, I don't know how to feel about that, right? As a former player, I'm all about guys leaving and getting opportunities. The problem therein lies, if they're going to head down to Auburn, if they're going to head up to Tennessee, they're getting a lot of those, those insider kind of information in terms of that matchup they're going to have later in the year. They know about everybody in the roster. They can stand in front of the room, right, and say, hey, listen, this guy's not good on his back pedal. This guy's not good in space. This guy's that. This guy's that. It's nothing you can't get off film, but it is a little bit of an edge up in terms of, how a lot of guys think of it. And Justin DeMarco weighs in and says, at the end of the day, if a player isn't fitting in, let them go. Only leaves the room for more 5 stars to come. I tend to agree with that as well. Now, the topic would be that, Bama has to have a little bit more roster management. How much can they really bring in from other schools if they're already kind of, lined out with the recruits. We saw them go back to the 2018 class and add a quarterback last week from the 2018 class. So Nick Saban, though, I'm telling you, a lot of people, kind of outside of the Alabama program question how that worked. Nick Saban will adjust just fine. I think it's interesting to see a lot of you guys kind of commenting in. Nate Gettleman says, I don't think any Bama rejects know the system better than Smart or Pruitt or Kiffin. There's a lot of merit to that as well. I think those guys have a lot of good things going on in terms of what they probably know, and Jeremy Pruitt stands a pretty good chance of knowing what Nick Saban's doing down there at Alabama. So Let me hit the reset for a second right now, reintroduce the show. My name is Mike Johnson. This is Roll Tide Daily. Like I say at the top of every show, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure this is the best 30 minutes of you guys' day. We're going to talk all Alabama football, a ton of Nick Saban stuff. Just got done with a little bit of Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt. We're going to continue on today, talk a little bit about Greg Byrne and the Bryant-Denny Stadium beer sales stuff that's kind of going on right now. But you guys just can continue to come in the comment section and do us a favor. Share the show. If you like the show, if you like Alabama football, share the show to your Facebook friends, your YouTube friends. We're monitoring the comment section on both sides, so thank you guys for hanging out with us. Now, topic number 2 on the day, I think, goes along with something I take a lot of pride in as a guy who played under Nick Saban, as a guy who saw a lot of these coaches. USA Today and George Schroeder had an interesting article kind of out yesterday about how in the SEC coaching circles right now, it's just Nick Saban and everybody else. And I think it's one of these interesting things. I think we have a quote from yesterday from this article kind of popping up in terms of just what Nick Saban has meant in terms of the SEC coaching tree over the last couple of years. So we don't have the quote right now, but do we have the graphic to be able to put up on the screen in terms of that tweet from yesterday? This graphic kind of shows you what exactly is going on in terms of these coaches. These are the coaching changes that have happened at all these schools. Now, you guys look at it and say, okay, Arkansas's got 4, Auburn's got 3. I'm going to name off some of the names right now, and this is why I take a little bit more pride than I probably should have on a topic like this. This Nick Saban article and this Nick Saban quote, and I'm going to quote George Schroeder right now when I say this. As Alabama has won 5 national championships in 11 years, the rest of the SEC has gone through 27 coaching changes, and all but Texas A&M and Missouri, which joined the league in 2012, have done it at least once. Saban's success and skyrocketing salaries have sent the expectations and the pressure ratcheting ever higher. And I'm going to name these names right now because a lot of these guys Alabama fans don't like, including me, including a former player. Got Philip Fulmer, Tommy Tuberville, Sylvester Croom, Houston Nutt, Les Miles, Mark Richt, Kevin Sumlin, Butch Jones, Gene Chizik, all those guys losing their jobs, in my opinion, can be kind of connected directly back to what Nick Saban's done at Alabama. I think he has forced the hand of a lot of these other SEC coaching staffs, a lot of the other administrations in the SEC, in terms of what they have to do. He's forced their hands to kind of clean out the closet. Gene Chizik won a national title. Guess what? A year later, he's fired at Auburn. Les Miles wins a national title. A few years later, he's fired, they're down at LSU. When you talk about Philip Fulmer, right, a guy that Alabama fans have grown to hate over the years, he's a guy that got fired too. And a lot of this can be connected directly back to what Nick Saban has been able to accomplish. He really has set the bar in terms of the coaches. I think it's so interesting, too. And George Schroeder kind of mentioned this. Nick Saban will turn 67 on Halloween this year, but in a development that should frighten his peers, insists he has no plans to retire any soon. Now, this is something a lot of people started keeping track of back in my day, right? 07, 08, 09. Some of these coaches start falling. Another guy that I'll kind of mention to you is Tommy Bowden of Clemson. After that kickoff classic game in 08, a lot of you guys remember the butt whooping we put on Clemson back in that game. Tommy Bowden calls Nick Saban, right? He asks him, what did you see? What did you expose off of us? A few weeks later, Dabo Swinney's the interim coach over there at Clemson. So it's something I take a lot of pride in. A lot of people weighing in the comment section. Katie Rundle says they were all Sabanized. I think they were definitely Sabanizing. That's a good term to kind of use right there. I like to use the term processed. Philip Fulmer and a couple of those other guys got processed. Les Miles, like I said, I think Mark Richt, actually, they didn't play a ton of games. They played a couple. I think his firing kind of dates directly back to what Nick Saban's been able to do right there. So Robbie Harris weighing in. Nick Saban has been good for football and coaching salaries. Dean Mitchell, Saban sets the bar high. Alabama is the gold standard. I think that's such a great point to bring up. Now, we've had a couple of ADs over the last couple of days down in spring meetings that have pointed to the fact that these salaries, these assistant coaching salaries, are absolutely skyrocketing. And why is that? Alabama's willing to pay them what they need. Alabama's willing to make Jeremy Pruitt, Kirby Smart, Lane Kiffin, $1 million assistant coaches. Heck, Scott Cochran's making $650,000 plus a year right now. So they're kind of pushing the bar in terms of that support staff, bringing these other assistants along, forcing these other schools that don't really want to keep up with the Joneses to really make some tough decisions in terms of what's going on inside and outside of the thing. James Perkins says processed out. Like I said, I love that topic. I love talking about people getting processed. I love, really feeling like Nick Saban has put his imprint on what is really happening inside and outside of so many of these SEC programs. Bobby J. Smith, these other schools have unreal expectations now that Saban has had all the success. I tend to agree with that. I really do. Les Miles, to me, getting fired. LSU was tired of getting beat by Alabama 4 years in a row, 5 years in a row, really getting shut out in that national title game back in 2011. They grew pretty tired of their ex-coach up in Tuscaloosa being able to come down to Baton Rouge and really deal with business down there and kind of, I don't want to say kick Les Miles to the curb, but he had a lot of say-so in that Les Miles tenure and Orgeron coming in, promising all these different things. Les Miles tried to play Nick Saban football, and it didn't work out for him in the end, and that's why he's still kind of looking for a job right now. in terms of what's going on in his career. He showed up down in spring meetings yesterday, and they didn't have a seat for him, I guess is the best way to kind of put that. So thank you guys for weighing in. Keep the comments coming in. Lindsay Page asks, who's next on the chopping block? Now, I think that's a pretty good question. I think when you look at who's around the SEC, who's kind of up and coming, who the good coaches are, who the bad coaches are, I think you can make an argument that maybe Matt Luke might be headed out pretty soon if he doesn't get that Ole Miss program pointing in the right direction. But the easy answer here is Ed Orgeron down at LSU. He's really got to keep a lot of these recruits from heading up to Tuscaloosa, having the Saban effect, having a lot of the things that are going on inside of Tuscaloosa. Because Nick Saban's been going down to Baton Rouge, going down to Amite, Louisiana, going down to a lot of these places, kind of cherry picking who he wants to kind of join the thing. Bobby J. Smith says the Gus Bus is next on his way out. He just got a huge salary, $7.5 million a year over the next, 5, 6, 7 years. Got a huge buyout. I don't know that it'll be the Gus Bus, but I'm with you. I don't know that I'm sold on him quite yet as what he brings to the table as being a head coach. So a little quick reset again. My name is Mike Johnson. This is Roll Tide Daily, 30-minute show Monday through Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern time. Thank you guys for joining us. Please share the show if you love it. Justin Del Marco weighing back in saying the Saban effect will ripple into the future, far past when Saban retires. The expectation will be way too high and unrealistic. I agree with that. This is, in terms of Alabama fans, and you guys know this, this is the greatest 10 years in the history of college football for any program. And to think that it's going to be replicated with ease by anybody that's a Saban assistant is just probably thinking a little bit too much in terms of what your program might be. So we're going to move on a little bit, right? And I just talked a little bit about recruiting down in the state of Louisiana, kind of doing some things. I think this is an interesting topic to come up, and I love this soundbite. I know you guys are going to love this soundbite as well. Anybody who's paid attention to kind of the offseason storyline as far as the Georgia Bulldogs go, the team Alabama beating the national title, Kirby Smart's had a lot of success recruiting. Bama got a commitment a couple of weeks ago from a guy named Antonio Alfano. Now, he went on with one of our friends here at SEC Country, Ryan Fowler, for the Alabama podcast last week, and he's kind of asked the question, listen, what was the difference in terms of what Georgia was bringing to the table and what Alabama was bringing to the table? What really swayed your decision? I think you're going to like what Antonio Alfano has to say right here.
I got a chance to meet with Coach Kirby Smart. Everything they do over there, which is kind of crazy, is based off of Alabama football. They're showing me their defensive schemes, the defensive layout, everything is basically Alabama. That's where Coach Smart has learned it from. And I'm like, you know what? Like, the reason how Georgia kind of got ruled out was, I was like, why go to a replica of the place that they're doing it from? Why not just go to the original place, Coach Nick Saban, Alabama football?
No, I think that if anybody didn't really hear Antonio Alfano's words right there, but if you did, you're sending up a hallelujah, aren't you? It's like, Georgia had that #1 recruiting class. Antonio Alfano is a really highly sought after top 100 recruit. He goes on with Ryan Fowler, and if you didn't hear him right there, kind of says, Georgia, they did a good job recruiting me. But the fact of the matter is, everything they showed me, everything they were about, everything they were trying to do was modeled after Alabama. And why am I going to go play for a replica when I can have the chance to go play for Nick Saban and the real deal over there in Tuscaloosa? Boy, those words sound like gospel coming out of Antonio Alfano's mouth. He's part of what is currently the #1 recruiting class in the country for 2019. Nick Saban trying to get that class back to being on top, back to being what he's used to be doing. That's bringing in #1 in classes. I hope that a lot of other recruits heard that. Bama has made no secret about the fact that their coaching staff this year, being a little younger, heading out on social media a little bit. We covered it a little bit last week. They're putting out graphics, putting out sound bites. They're asking, hey, why wouldn't you go to Alabama? We're rolling in 2019. They've got a ton of good prospects coming in. They got a ton of other 5-stars lined up for visits. Tony Alfano just being kind of one of the first dominoes to fall. I thought that was a very, very interesting clip in terms of what he's bringing to the table. Just says, listen, I don't know about people going over to Georgia. I think it's a good school. I like Kirby Smart. I like what they're doing. But listen, it's a replica for me. Ryan Fowler kind of mentions later on in that clip, Ryan, for you guys that know over in Tuscaloosa on Tide 102.9, kind of mentioned that clip. Listen, why would you drink Diet Pepsi when you can have the real thing without the consequences, right? And I think that's a great way to look at it. Nate Gettleman says, if the Alabama model works, why reinvent the wheel? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think a lot of people kind of realize that, or recruits are hopefully starting to realize that about Alabama. Nick Saban's not going anywhere anytime soon. So why go to a replica? Why go to somebody who's trying to replicate what they're doing over there in Tuscaloosa when you can just really circle back around and be a part of a program that, put 16 players in the NFL this past year? I don't even know how many draft picks, a ton of people. I think 60 plus guys on NFL rosters making $300+ million this year in the NFL. Go be a part of that if you're a recruit. Go be a part of that and dip down into Tuscaloosa and make sure make sure you're being a part of that program if you recruit. Scooter Rose weighing in says Saban sells the sizzle, not the steak, baby. I love that comment there from Scooter, my buddy there weighing in the comment section. I think that's good stuff. He definitely sells the good stuff for sure coming out of that program. No one is trying to reinvent the Gus bus, says Donald and Brittany Schultz. I definitely agree with that. Gus is building a little momentum recruiting, but not a lot of head-to-head battles with guys that Nick Saban's trying to bring on board. So it's definitely something to monitor in the coming weeks. And I think that when you talk about scheduling, when you talk about Nick Saban really trying to evolve what he's been doing, his game's coming up. Listen, they're scheduling. USC's in 2020. You're going to have the Texas home and home coming up before you know it. Notre Dame's on down the road. Getting these guys on campus, seeing a part of kind of some of these traditions by teams like Texas and teams like Notre Dame and some of these other teams start to come into the fold here. And Tuscaloosa is going to be a big deal moving forward. So reset real quick. My name is Mike Johnson. This is Roll Tide Daily. I appreciate everybody kind of comment in the comment section. We got a ton of people weighing in, a lot of Bama fans, a lot of Roll Tides coming in. Kimberly Michelle Cowden says Roll Tide. Malachi Morgan, at the end of the day, Bama just has a proven track record returning them out. That sells itself. Absolutely agree. Ron Hall Jr. says 72 draft picks since Nick Saban's been a head coach. Very proud to call myself one of those draft picks once upon a time about 8 years ago. Getting drafted to the Atlanta Falcons, I was a part of that. I'm very thankful for what Nick Saban has allowed me to do. That's why we are coming to you live from Atlanta. I was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm happy to live over in the state of Georgia right now, but bring you guys the best of stuff back in the state of Alabama. Speaking of scheduling, now I think there's a couple of interesting things to talk about here. But when you talk about these kind of games that don't really bring you out of your seats, right, that don't make you want to get off the couch and head up to Tuscaloosa, I think Nick Saban had some really, really interesting comments yesterday down from the spring meetings in Destin. We had the graphic right here to show you guys from the comments they had yesterday with, I think this is George Schroeder, maybe doing a little bit of interview. We pointed to him earlier today in the USA Today. Nick Saban's kind of asked about, what do you think they should do about the schedule? Here's what's his comments right here. First of all, he talks about playing 9 conference games, and then he says, I think Power 5 conference teams should play all College 5 conference teams. Then, to me, losing 2 games wouldn't knock you out of this because you'd be playing more good teams. You can barely have a bad game in college football and survive it. I don't know about you guys sitting in those chairs at home, watching your computers, watching your iPhones, watching your tablets, doing whatever you're doing right now. I had to put my hands up in the air when I heard Nick Saban say this. I've been one of these people for years that likes to talk about 9 conference games. It's a shame to me that Alabama and Georgia play twice in the span of 10 years. I love the 9 conference game schedule, and I love the thought of not having to worry about buying my tickets and welcoming in the Citadel, not having to worry about buying my tickets and welcoming in Georgia State, Georgia Southern, whatever it may be. I love this. I love the thought of Nick Saban. I think it's so interesting to kind of hear his introspective point of view as a coach to talk about this topic because he points to later in this kind of interview and he says, you know what? I've met a lot of resistance about this because a lot of coaches inside of the SEC, and I'm looking at you, Vanderbilt, I'm looking at you, Kentucky, probably looking at you, Ole Miss, maybe even Missouri right now in terms of what they went through last year. Says a lot of coaches meet that with resistance. How, if you're going to play a 9-game conference schedule and play all Power 5 teams, how is everybody going to get to bowl eligibility? Nick Saban had some interesting comments on that as well. He goes on to say that, you know what, maybe we should have a committee selecting these bowl teams. That's one of those hurdles that you really, really want to try to get over if you're Nick Saban. You really, really going to want to talk about in terms of your season ticket holders, man, your boosters, everybody that's shown up in Tuscaloosa and doing all these things and buying season tickets. Why not offer them the best possible game in terms of what's going on with them? But speaking of Bryant-Denny Stadium, right? Speaking of good times for season ticket holders, speaking of good things coming out of Tuscaloosa, I thought it was interesting yesterday that Greg Byrne brought up a topic. Now, this isn't going to be a lengthy conversation because I think I know how all of you guys feel back there in the comment section. Anybody watching out there in Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, Alabama, the Southeast, right? Anybody that's really a fan of the SEC, been a lot of talk at these spring meetings about maybe having beer or alcohol sales in the stadiums. But I got some disappointing news for you. Yesterday, Greg Byrne kind of goes on with Paul Feinbaum, and he says, you know what? That's a topic that's coming up, but we in Tuscaloosa aren't really leading the charge on that. And I had to give it a big womp, womp, womp. Man, I was so disappointed to hear Greg Byrne, the AD at Alabama, a guy who I love, a guy who I think really gets it in terms of what Alabama brings to the table, in terms of what really an Alabama fan is all about. Kind of gives you the, you know what, we're not leading the charge on that. Beer sales is not a big deal for us. And I'm interested to hear you guys in the comment section talking about beer sales and how many of you guys really want that, right? How many guys want beer sales in Bryant-Denny Stadium? Do you like that it's a family atmosphere? Would you like to be able to go up and buy a couple of beers? Justin DelMarco giving it 4 thumbs down in terms of Greg Byrne kind of voting that away. Personally, I like to be able to drink a beer at a sporting event. I don't want it to get out of hand. I think when you talk about the student section, some of the more rowdy sections of Bryant-Denny Stadium, it would be a worry for me. But you know what? Most of those people, by the time some of those night games get along, I've probably had their fill as it is. So I don't know if it's a huge deal to me. Ron Hall Jr. says probably not smart. I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it. I would have been on board in terms of having these beer sales come into Bryant-Denny Stadium. I think there's got to be a way to look at it and say, you know what, we can limit it to 3 or 4 beers, something like that. I mean, Bama fans, I know most of you guys, there's some NASCAR fans out there, some NFL fans out there. You guys like to show up and get the beer, right? NASCAR at Talladega, you can bring in all the beer you want to. Ron Hall Jr. says, I've had too many spilled on me at NFL games. Katie Reynolds says, sucks, but it's not necessary for ticket sales, money, or fandom in Alabama. And that's an interesting thing to point to as well. When you talk about really the seats are going to be filled, right? The stadium's going to be filled. The season tickets are going to be sold. All the students are going to show up regardless. A lot of people are going to be tailgating, drinking that beer, drinking that bourbon. I would love nothing more than to go in there and get a cold beer, but I understand, parents and people that are talking about that way. Jazz Hatcher says people sneak alcohol in anyways. May as well take money from it. I tend to agree with that. I'd be lying to you if I had not snuck in Bryant-Denny Stadium myself. Colin Business says mini bottle sales. I think that's a good way to look at it as well. How many mini bottles can you sell and kind of pour in some of those good Cokes they sell there at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Mickey Jordan says, great show, Mike and RTR. We appreciate you guys being with us. And I think we've had a good 30 minutes today. We've talked a lot about Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Jeremy Pruitt. But as you guys know, I like to end the show every day with a little bit of Bama nostalgia. You try to leave you guys with a nice video, and being how it's Thursday, a little bit of a throwback Thursday video right here just to get you guys smiling before I let you go. Just a short little snippet here from a Twitter video that was tweeted out a couple of days ago. I think you're going to like this. A little bit throwback Thursday back to January 7th in Atlanta. Here you go right here.
Ball back on the 42. They lost 16 yards. Second 26 on the 41, they say. Tagovailoa going downfield. He's got a man open. Oh, my God. Touchdown. Alabama has won it.
It just doesn't get old, does it? It just does not get old to be able to see that video, be able to hear that kind of Georgia broadcast. Not that I'm trying to rub it in, but the Georgia broadcast is a great thing to listen to. Second time watching, love the show, says Ron Hall Jr. Too many drunks already, says Donna Allen Wyatt. Malachi Morgan says, Mike, you rebel you, in reference to me kind of bringing some minis in the boot. But I appreciate you guys watching and follow along. Great comment section today. Make sure you guys follow us. Make sure you guys like our Facebook page, follow our Facebook page. You can get us on YouTube. You can get us on Twitter at SEC Country Bama. And if you like what I'm doing, I do another show this afternoon with my buddy Brandon Adams. It's SEC Country Live. It's on at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, 2 Central. Make sure you tune into that on the SEC Country Facebook page. But until next week, until Monday, we will not be on air tomorrow. Until Monday, you guys have a great weekend and roll tide.
You've been watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country.